What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be covering the deck that I've been playing in the XYZ Cup, having a fair amount of fun with, a fair amount of success with as well. Winning most of my games, had some losses against, some Numeron decks on the ladder, as I'm sure some of you have as well. You get Kaiju'd, you get OTK'd. What can you do sometimes? But for the most part, doing pretty well. Haven't run into too many self-TK decks. I think only about a quarter of my matches have been self-TK. Still a pandemic or epidemic of massive scales on the ladder for anyone that's been playing. But that being said, jumping into the deck that I've been playing Lyrilusc Zoodiac. Looking at some of the other Lyrilusc lists that I saw online, I wasn't a big fan of how inconsistent they seemed to be. You really do want to open Warbler plus Cobalt Sparrow every single game. In order to facilitate that, we are playing Tri-Brigade cards in this XYZ only event, just to act as foolish burials for the Lyrilusc cards. I don't actually own a copy of Foolish Burial. That might be another good option to play instead of something like the third Tanky if you really want to. But going into the general card by card, we have one copy of DD Crow because it is searchable in this deck off of Recital Starling and Cobalt Sparrow. There was times where I felt like this could be bumped up to 2 in those hands where I opened like 4 bird cards. So take that as you will, but never, like 1-0 is always good. Never felt bad to have this. One copy of Jester Confit. This is one card that we play for another card in our deck, Jack in the Hand. It's just a level 1 extender, that's all it does, because we're not playing Link format. Giving your opponent like a Jester Confit off of Jack in the Hand never feels bad at all. I noticed a lot of my opponents would take the Jester Confit. I think it's because it was the only card that was actually usable for them out of the ones that I revealed. But overall, just a really cool, like really solid, just free extender. Great in the rare slot. Moving on to the bird cards that we have in our deck. 3 copies of Cobalt Sparrow. You want to see it all the time. Whether or not you're special summoning it off of Barrel Canary from the graveyard, Cobalt or Turquoise Warbler from your hand, like your hand or grave, or Sapphire Swallow later in your turn from your hand, you always need access to this card, and at least like at 1. The multiples, they can get a little rough. You just discard them, whatever. But you need to see this card. You need to see this card. So you play it at 3. Next, moving on, we play 2 copies of Sapphire Swallow. At first, I was playing 3, but as you can see, the deck is more than 40 cards. I wanted to make room for other stuff in this deck, so a couple of the birds had to give, and that was the Celestial Wagtail and the Sapphire Swallow, mostly because these were not direct starters, the same way that Barrel Canary and Turquoise Warbler were. We played 3 copies of Turquoise Warbler because this is the best starter in our deck. If you open an empty board with Turquoise Warbler and Sapphire and Cobalt Sparrow, it's full combo. You get to set up your UFD plus your Ensemble plus a DD Crow in hand, and then if you have like a Zoodiac card, you can play that as well, and then you end up with like a bunch of stuff. Plus you get a free draw off of another card we'll talk about later. This card is just a really good starter. It's really good that Bird Call can special summon this out of your hand mid-combo sequence. That allows you to extend further because this card, to get its effect to special summon, only requires that it was special from hand. Next, we have 3 copies of Barrel Canary. Post turn, your turn 2 or your turn 3 onward, you're playing Barrel Canary basically as your starter for every single turn. That gets you into your plays. This deck doesn't extend super well past turn 3, but it has such a high-powered board turn 1 and such an easy kill turn 2 or turn 3 that it's really okay. But you do want to see 3 Barrel Canary because sometimes this is your starter, and this is always your extender. So it's good at 3, and I would never touch this at 3 in a pure bird list. Next we have 2 copies of Celestial Wagtail. This was good for me at 2. You see it in your opening hand more consistently. You dump it, and yeah, just having access to 2 is nice. Being able to special summon it out of hand isn't good, or being able to special summon it from the graveyard is good as well. There's times where if I open the Sparrow, I'll dump the Wagtail instead to get early Wagtail access over the Sparrow, because and during the combo sequence will essentially do the same thing. Wagtail grabbing Bird Call, Cobalt Sparrow grabbing something like a Barrel, or grabbing your Sapphire. So they function similarly. And that's it for the birds. Then we have a couple hand traps. Maxi. I only own one Maxi, so we have our one Maxi. 3 copies of Ash Blossom, because we want to negate Maxi. Same goes with Call by the Grave. We have our 5 counters to Maxi for their only 3 Maxi. Theoretically, we should draw ours more. And then 2 Zoodiac cards that we play in this deck. We play 1 copy of Thoroughblade and 1 copy of Ram. These are in here in case we already open the Fractal, or we have a single follow-up, or the only play that we open is tanky. Say our hand isn't like super optimal, like we have 1 bird, like if we have a Sapphire Swallow and a Fractal, that doesn't actually get us to any plays. So with that, playing the Zoo cards, we have like a fallback plan that we can go on to and just make like a Trident and pass. Or if we open a Zoodiac card plus a tanky, no other bird plays, we can actually do the Zoodiac UFD combo where we discard Ram, draw a card, and then go through all that and then leave the board on UFD Ram with good floating potential, or UFD Thoroughblade for for better damage numbers. And then this engine is just really good as well, because you can go into a 6 material Zeus in this deck. The extra deck space isn't that relevant. Yeah, so there's enough room for me to just play 1 of every single Zoodiac name in here, which is really cool because it means that on turn 1, if I open just a Zoodiac play, I can go Thoroughblade, or I can go Hammer Kong, Trident, pass. And then if on a follow-up play, I want to make a Zeus play with my other Zoo monster, I still have the 3 Zoo names, plus the Zoo itself, so that becomes a 4 material Zeus. So like you get a lot of utility out of these cards, and I really like the Zoodiac engine. And honestly, the Zoodiac engine sometimes wins you the game on its own. Like there's several games on ladder where I played just Zoodiac for the game because that's all I saw, and it was good enough with like hand traps and other stuff that we play. 3 copies of Fractal. All this is in here for is to send a Cobalt Sparrow or a Celestial Wagtail from our deck to our grave. That's basically all this card does, and that's all this card needs to do. We'll go into it a little more. I'll just talk about it now, actually. Cobalt Sparrow, you have 3 copies of it. You have 3 copies of Fractal. You have 3 copies of Tanky. You have essentially 9 copies of this card in your deck, which is really good because that means that you don't ever have to bird call for Cobalt Sparrow. You can bird call for your higher quality cards, right? So if we see Cobalt Sparrow, Tanky, Fractal, and then the counterparts to that are our 3 copies of Warbler, our 3 copies of Barrel Canary, our 3 copies of Bird Call, our 2 copies of Jack in the Hand. Basically, we have a combination of 9 and 11, so there's a very high likelihood that we see the optimal hand every single game, or some variety of optimal every single game. I'll even throw in Wagtail in here as like, let's say the 10th and 11th like Cobalt Sparrow, because it kind of starts your plays in the same way. So like we have one half of our deck that we want to see with the other half of our deck, and we're playing high enough numbers of both where we should be able to consistently do our combos. And that, in my experience, that has been the case. I think I've lost 1, maybe 2 games out of the 35 or so that I've played to just bricking. So it just shows you that this deck is very consistent, or it is very consistent with its openings in that regard. 1 copy of Nibiru. If we're playing Maxi, we're playing Nibiru. If our opponent Maxi challenges us, I want something that I can draw into that will make them lose the Maxi challenge and not just beat me. 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster, because it's Harpy's Feather Duster. Originally, I was playing Harpy's Feather Storm, which can search Harpy's Feather Duster. However, as time went on, I just never resolved it, really. Like, you have to see Bird Combo plus the Harpy's Feather Storm in your opening hand. It just felt really win more. When I drew it off the top for my 6th card, it always felt bad. So that got cut, but that originally in here could search Feather Duster. But Feather Duster on its own is really good. In the XYZ Festival, there's a fair amount of decks that don't want to XYZ summon, and they just kind of want to play back row decks. Or like they play, they don't want to do combo XYZ stuff. They want to play more control-based stuff, maybe like a Dark Magician, or I think that's it, or pure Zoodiac also. Feather Duster's kind of a blowout against those decks. 2 copies of Jack in the Hand. It kind of touched on this earlier, but I think it should be going more in depth. This is an additional consistency card. I'm playing Jack in the Hand over Where Art Thou, because Where Art Thou requires you to control a level 1 at the start, where Jack in the Hand allows you to basically get the starter. So the distinction there was really important for me. Basically, what you can do is, depending on your hand, you reveal different things. But if you don't have a starter, what you can do is you can reveal Jester Confit, Warbler, and Barrel Canary, right? And then that's assuming that you have maybe like a tanky in hand for the Barrel Canary, to send Cobalt Sparrow from your deck to the grave. Or you might do like the Sapphire Swallow as well, because you have like a different bird in hand, and maybe you can go, you can like extend with that. It really depends, but I play the Jester Confit, so there's always like an extender option in there. And then most of the time your hands work out such that revealing Barrel or Turquoise Warbler will start your play off of Jack in the Hand. But Jack in the Hand, yeah, like this deck is all 2-card combos, so you just need to see cards more consistently. 3 copies of Bird Call. This card, this is just the tanky for the deck. That does everything. The fact that this special summons a card out of your hand as well is wonderful for play extension. Like in the cases where you don't open Warbler, and your hands seem like they might be kind of awkward because you have to normal summon something, then maybe then activate Sapphire Swallow to special 2 from hand. You can Warbler later in your turn by searching it first, and then searching something else off of Bird Call. So you're able to get like free play extension off of this card while searching at the same time. So really just like probably one of the best tankies in the game. Bird Strike, I'm on the fence with. It's a good card that you could search early off of Wagtail if your opponent doesn't want to commit to like popping or negating something on your board, and you already have the gas in hand. You could go instead of going like Warbler into Sparrow, you can go Warbler into Wagtail to search out the Bird Strike, and then you Bird Strike your opponent to turn off their board. It was relevant a couple times, but it's kind of on the fence. I don't like that it takes up a deck spot and we're over 40, and that and that I have to have a bird card in order to have it be viable on the field or to turn off my opponent's stuff. So sometimes it's a little too specific where you just draw it by itself, but it is a good searchable card to have, so I think I'll keep playing it. 3 copies of Tanky for consistency, searches both our Fractal and our Zoodiac cards. This card basically always gets value, especially with Forbidden Droplets in our deck. Bird Sanctuary, I go into this most of the time, all my bird combos, just to draw additional cards. So basically, your standard combo, which I'll go through in a second, doesn't actually require you to use the bird call like the Tri-Brigade one does. So you can either search the bird call for follow-up for next turn, or you can search the Bird Sanctuary to just get another free generic draw, and then every turn that this stays on the board, you get a free draw, which is really good. Yeah, so I think there were some games where I drew like 2 cards off of this and then beat my opponent. So this was always nice to have. Yeah, and then this also allows you to OTK your opponent with Assembled Nightingale by basically taking all the materials that you have on the field, putting them all under one card, and then attacking. So in that regard, this card's pretty good, really good as well, because it gives you like free OTK potential. 2 copies of Twin Twister for any random back row decks that I see on the ladder. Since we don't have access to Access Code Talker, if our opponent skill drains us, we need to have main deck outs for it, because otherwise we can't resolve it. Funnily enough, we do have some main deck outs in the form of like for activating Zoodiac Trident, Forbidden Droplets, sending our own Trident, because then our Trident will resolve because it's no longer in the field under skill drain. But those hands require you to like use your normal summon first and then do it, which is not great, but it does clear your board so you can Warbler afterwards. But Twin Twister here just added consistency for back row decks. 2 copies of Called by the Grave because Max C sucks. I don't want to lose to Max C. I'm playing 2 copies of Called by the Grave. It gets great value across basically every matchup in the game. If your key extender gets ashed, you Called by it. If you get Max C'd, you Called by it. We play 5 copies of, we play 3 Ash, 2 Called by. We should be drawing these cards more than our opponents are drawing Max C, so we should be losing to Max C less. And then finally, for the last 3 cards on deck, we have 3 copies of Forbidden Droplets. The synergy with this deck is decent. We play Fire Formation Tanky, so we have a free card a lot of the time to send off of Droplets. Aside from that, this card is just one of the best in Yu-Gi-Oh! The ability to turn off an opponent's entire board and then OTK them with maybe 2 or 3 cards left in your hand, really good. Also just gets around cards that you can't possibly out otherwise, like VFD. If your opponent sees like VFD plus Utopic Dragonar, that's actually the one that's come up the most with droplets while play testing or while playing in the XYZ Festival, is that you need to be able to negate the VFD. And the droplets is only the only real card that deals with every problem and not just one problem. So as much as I say, like, I think people have asked about Chalice before in my comments. Chalice you can play. I just don't think it's as high impact as droplets is. And if you don't have this card, I would heavily consider building towards it. If you have the excess gems from this event, maybe pull from the Dark Lord set that this is from. I ended up spending money to pull from the Dark Lord set to pull a playset of these, and then also get the excess URs because I didn't have the material to craft them otherwise. And so, yeah, I think this card is worth crafting 100%, or it's worth going into that box. The Dark Lord box is worth going into just for this card. It's that good. It's really that good. Moving on to the extra deck, we play our Utopic Draco Future engine of 1 copy of Future, 1 copy of Draco. People can't out this card sometimes. You steal their cards, makes going for game easier, can't be destroyed by battle or card effect. Your opponent always has to commit the Kaiju or the negate to this. And then if they don't negate the Ensemble, their life is still hard because then they have a card that keeps bouncing their stuff back to hand, which you always make on your like standard 2-card combo board. For our birds, we play 2 copy of Recital Starling. The main searcher of the deck also goes into VFD or UFD early on. You can also pump your opponent's monsters and then OTK by attacking your opponent's monsters with your own Recital Starlings. Because you can assemble to make it so you don't take damage that turn. So that's really funny. I had a guy leave a monster in defense position, and I just made it super big and then just crashed all my stuff into it and won the game that way. So it's just like probably one of the best cards in this deck. Assembled Nightingale. It's incredibly difficult to deal with this card. And then you know that a Zeus is following up this card. So it's really easy to make like this as your first rank 1 of the turn to force out like a Zeus that your opponent might have. Did that a couple times where if they made format Zeuses, I'd commit cards to the board to just like force the Zeus out, like one of the Zeuses out, and then on the following turn, start my turn with Assembled, so that it would force the second part of the Zeus out. So yeah, this card's like one of the best in the deck as well. 1 copy of Ensemble Blue Robin. This is one of your, this is what you end your board on. Yeah, the fact that it floats into another card on the follow-up turn, really good as well. Yeah, I don't think too much needs to be said about this card. Definitely the best bird to end on for your end boards. Promenade Thresh came up a few times where you get to shuffle back a card on your opponent's field, and then detach materials to make Assembled really big. You make it really awkward on your opponent for like what to negate here when you have both of these cards, because if they don't negate the Promenade, your Assembled gets like 2 more attacks plus you out a back row card. But if they do negate it, then this could also just become Utopic Draco Future material or material for Bird Sanctuary. So if you have Bird Sanctuary plus Promenade on the field, like you basically get to put a ton of stuff under your Nightingale to guarantee the damage there. So overall, really good. 1 copy of Downward Magician to go into over your link 1s, like Assembled Nightingale, and then go into Zeus afterwards. And then 1 copy of Tiger Mortar, 1 copy of Trident, 1 copy of Borbo, 1 copy of Hammer Kong, 1 copy of Chicanine. These are all of our Zoo cards that we play to go into Zeus. And then we also play 1 copy of Drill Driver Vespinato. For the games where we just play Zoo, this ends up filling an important damage breakpoint, where if we start the turn with just Trident, we could go like on our follow-up turn, overlay for Chicanine, detach special Trident, Tiger Mortar, reattach to Trident, go into Drill Driver. So we keep the Trident live, but we also put damage pressure on the board. And then, yeah, that's basically it for that. And then 1 copy of Zeus. We're in the XYZ Cup. This is the best XYZ in the game. We're playing all XYZ. You slap this down for even in the XYZ Cup, where everyone's also playing Zeus. People have a really hard time adding a Zeus for 6. So this card is absolutely worth playing, and overall really good. I've been having a ton of fun with this list. It's been very consistent, has a very strong first one turn, and a very strong turn 2, because we play the cards like Duster, Twin Twister, Droplets. I wish I could have found Rune for Prosperity in this deck, but I would rather play cards that I know directly start my turn, like Fractal or Tenki, over cards that will maybe get to a starter, because it's like, you know, guaranteed versus maybes. But you do miss the draw power in this deck. That being said, we're going to jump into a very basic combo that I want to cover before the end of this video. So starting off with this first combo I wanted to show off, basically what you need is you need access to Cobalt Sparrow plus access to your Turquoise Warbler. So we open Bird Call in this hand, so we're going to Bird Call for the Warbler. We're kind of going to ignore every other card in our hand right now, just because I wanted to show off the 2-card combo here. We're not going to special summon a card to a field, and then we're going to special Warbler out of our hands, use its effect to summon the Sparrow. We activate the Sparrow, and we are going to add the Celestial Wagtail. Normally off of this first search I add like a Sapphire Swallow, and then because after my first XYZ summon I normally go Sapphire Swallow into Celestial Wagtail. It might have honestly been better here just to go for the Barrel Canary instead of the Celestial Wagtail, because we already had one of the 2 cards that we needed in hand. So here we can go into Recital Starling. You kind of feel it out. Because we're going to go into 2 recitals this turn, I would grab the play extension first. So here we'll add the Barrel Canary. But if we didn't already have access to the Sapphire Swallow, this is where, or the Sapphire Swallow Celestial Wagtail, this is where you have added both, so that you can then do Sapphire from hand, special Wagtail. Wagtail effect's going to trigger, and this will get you a copy of Bird Sanctuary from your deck to your hands. From here, you overlay the 2 into your second copy of Recital Starling. Using neither effects, and then you're going to detach either card, doesn't matter, to add, in this case, because we have all of our birds, we can either add play extension for next turn, or we can just add a hand trap. So I'm going to add the DD Crow. And then from here, you can go into your Utopic Future. So that way, before we are committing to our play extension, we make a Draco Future, so that we can't get Nibiru. Go into Draco Future here. And now we can, if we are a little uncertain of what we want to commit to the play, we can actually go for Bird Sanctuary here. Bird Sanctuary, to get the draw effect, only requires that you have a monster with 3 or more materials. We do for Draco Future, so we draw a card. And we drew into another hand trap, which is really cool. So we get to special summon our Barrel Canary here now. We are going to special summon Sapphire Swallow. You want to summon Sapphire Swallow because the Sapphire Swallow will reattach another card for Graveyard when you make your Ensemble. So now we make Ensemble. And then we activate the Sapphire effect. We're going to reattach, I like to reattach Warbler to leave the Cobalt Sparrow engrave for next turn. And then you use the effect of Wagtail Engrave to re-equip to your Ensemble. So off of these 2 cards, we got a UFD, a Utopic Draco Future. We got a 4 material Ensemble Robin. We have a DD Crow, because you always get to search the DD Crow, because you always get to search this DD Crow off of the... No, I'm sorry. You don't always end on the DD Crow. You only end on the DD Crow if you already had a Sapphire Swallow, or if you have either a Sapphire Swallow or a Wagtail already in hand, or a Barrel Canary already in hand. Then you can end on the DD Crow. Otherwise, you just end on Utopic Draco Future plus Ensemble plus the draw off of Bird Sanctuary. So your 2-card combo nets you negate, 4 bounces, a draw, And then if you had any other extenders, you convert one of those cards in your hands into a hand trap. And then at this point in your turn, if you still have the tanky in your hands, that you weren't forced to commit to your standard play, you can either save the tanky for next turn to maybe Zeus them, or this combo doesn't actually use your normal summon, so you can search out a Zoodiac Ram or a Thoroughblade if you want more damage. You go for Ram, overlay for Hammercon, and then overlay for Trident. So basically, if you have any excess like tankies or anything, they're not just dead cards. They convert into quality disruptions and quality cards. On the next turn, if this sticks, we get to go into Vespinato, which is not quite lethal, but it's close to lethal without committing anything extra to the board. We'll be 300 shy of lethal, so any card with 300, which can be a little bit hard to come by, is game here. So even just like instead of bringing back the Trident, if you want to just bring back the Ram, that on its own will be lethal. Plus you will get another draw on the next turn. You have your hand traps to stop your opponent. Utopic Draco Future is really hard to out. Ensemble is really hard to play through. So this is the pretty standard end board that I wanted to show you all for this video. Going second, there's some other nuances that what you can do, but this is your standard like turn one board that you're aiming for. And going second now, we're going to show that this deck actually does have a really high OTK potential. Even with your basic combos here, we're going to start off with Fractal, sending Cobalt, Warbler, activate its effect, bring back the Cobalt from grave. You can use the Cobalt effects. Since we already have a Sapphire in hand, I would probably go for a Barrel Canary here myself. But if we didn't have it, similar to our first turn combo, we want to get Celestial Wagtail and Sapphire Swallow into our hands. So I'll just do that here, because I know against the AI they don't have the cards, just to show you what we kind of want to go into. And then we go into Recital. And then here we will actually Recital effect to boost up our opponent's monster. If they have anything bigger than I think 1800 or larger, you can actually not do any extra fancy stuff and just OTK them with their card on the field by using a couple Recital effects. So then we'll activate Recital here, detaching one, to search our deck for whatever we don't have in our hand currently. Right now we don't have a barrel, so we're going to search out the Barrel Canary. Next we'll use the Sapphire Swallow in hand to special summon the Wagtail. Wagtail effect is going to activate, and depending on what your opponent has, you'll either go for the Bird Call here or the Bird Sanctuary. If your opponent doesn't have any cards on the field, you go for the Bird Call, because it'll give you the additional material that you need to be able to OTK them with Utopic Draco Future, plus a 5 material Assembled Nightingale. Since our opponent has a monster on our field we can crash into, I'm just going to add the Bird Sanctuary. From here, you go into the second copy of Recital Starling. You're going to use its effect to boost up your opponent's monster again. And then you're going to activate the effect of Recital. Detaching Sapphire here, because we need the material on the assembled that we're going to make. Here we'll just add DD Crow. Doesn't matter, since we already have everything in hand. And I'm not going to use the additional card off of DD Crow, because you don't need to for this OTK. But if you are missing damage, you can normal summon the DD Crow, so you have one extra attack with your Assembled Nightingale. In this case, we have lethal already with just the 2 cards that we started. So there's no need to do anything extra. So then with these 2, we go into Assembled. The Sapphire will trigger, getting us a re-equip. And now it doesn't look like we have game, because we have a 0 attack monster, a 0 attack monster, an 800 attack monster. But when we go to battle phase, Assembled gets to skip over our opponent. Make sure that you fully drag to your opponent, otherwise you'll accidentally attack their monster. you attack the full amount of times with assembled. And then you activate the assembled effect, making it so that your birds cannot be destroyed by battle or card effect this turn, and you take no damage from battle. And then you just crash your recitals into your opponent. For a pretty easy OTK. Like I said, if your opponent doesn't have any cards on the field that you can boost up like that, you can go for your standard Draco Future lines and set up to break their board and move on to the next turn. There's also times where you can just straight up skip over your opponent's stuff if your hand is good enough, where you get to make a assembled Nightingale with, if you make an assembled Nightingale with 6 materials, and one of those is a barrel canary, then it is 1400 attack and can attack 6 times, which is 8400. You get 6 materials basically by using the sanctuary to attach additional materials to it. So like for example, if I made the assembled with 3, if I made the assembled with 3 materials, the Cobalt Sparrow, the Sparrow that, or not the Cobalt Sparrow, the Sapphire Swallow that we use will reattach a material, and then we Bird Sanctuary to attach the other 2, and that's 8400 direct without having to touch your opponents at all. So both are valid OTKs. It kind of depends on what you want to feel for. If you do it the other way around and you end up not being able to OTK them for some reason, you can at least take the 2 and make UFD. And then you can either leave the assembled on the field or you can turn it into a Zeus. I like to leave the assembled on the field because it can be sometimes difficult to out. And then if your opponent's at a low life point total, it guarantees lethal through whatever they put on the board next turn. But yeah, those are some basic combos that I wanted to touch on for the deck. Overall, it's been a really fun deck to play during the Xyz Cup. It's a lot of fun. Relatively slower games because it takes a while for you to do through your combos, but your games don't typically go past turn 3 because you're able to really quickly beat them, or they surrender, or you're playing self-TK. So even though it seems like there's a lot of combo, it might be slow, you still have relatively fast-paced games. You end up with hands where you have to think about how you're going to play through your opponent's stuff and like combo to get there. So there's a bit of a skill curve with this deck when playing on ladder in order to always hit your like lethal marks. I don't think I'm quite there yet with the deck, even though I've been playing like Lyrilusc, Tri-Brigade, and this deck pure for a little while now. There's a lot to learn and a lot to master here. And I don't think I'll be able to do it justice in this video here. But that being said, this is a very fun deck I'd recommend checking out if you already have access to all these cards. And let me know what you guys are playing in the XYZ Festival. There's a ton of really cool decks. I've been actually having a ton of fun playing in the XYZ Festival because it's a different way of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, like without links, the game just like completely changes. So I'm super excited to see what the other festivals have in store for us. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.